In the year 1941, at a time when bureaucracy moved slower than innovation and fear of the enemy outweighed faith in ingenuity, the British government reluctantly conceded to an idea they had long dismissed as reckless, almost laughable, agreeing to allow one determined visionary, a man borderline obsessed with speed and performance, to build their next warplane. And this individual responded not with hesitation, but with burning ambition, installing not one, but two monstrous 1,600 horsepower Merlin engines into what most experts arrogantly sneered at as a glorified children's toy, a wooden aircraft, setting in motion a chain of events that would not only defy all conventional wartime aviation logic, but humiliate German air superiority in ways historians now recall with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. Because this was the birth of the DH-98 Mosquito, a creation so unlikely, so brilliantly rebellious, that it earned a symphony of nicknames ranging from the Wooden Wonder to the Loping Lumberyard to the chillingly poetic Timber Terror, each one conveying its own version of awe, mockery, and fear, but all united in recognizing that what everyone thought was weakness, fragility, and foolishness turned out to be one of the most ingenious tactical war assets ever unleashed by the Royal Air Force. To truly understand the Mosquito's origin story, one must travel back to 1909, when a 27-year-old by the name of Geoffrey de Havilland, freshly married and enthralled by speed like a man born too soon for jet engines, decided that motor cars and motorcycles could no longer satisfy his appetite for velocity, setting his sights instead on the skies, an arena of risk far greater and uncharted, yet infinitely more intoxicating. But there was one significant problem, as aircraft, even in their earliest and most basic forms, were remarkably expensive to build, a challenge that would derail lesser dreamers, but not de Havilland, who marched straight to the one person he believed might enable his ambition, his grandmother, boldly requesting not merely a loan, but what he literally phrased as an advance on his inheritance, politely bypassing the waiting period known as her natural lifespan. And astonishingly, this grandmother, demonstrating either immense faith or an equally daring personality, granted him £1,000, a fortune at the time equivalent to nearly $200,000 today, proving that sometimes world-changing innovation begins with audacity and a supportive relative. With those funds, he built his first wooden airplane entirely on his own, and after 2 years of relentless work, he took to the skies, only to crash it almost immediately, destroying the machine completely. But instead of retreating, he climbed from the wreck, smiling like a man confirmed in his purpose, and declared his eagerness to attempt it again, because certain minds simply cannot comprehend surrender, an attitude that would shape aviation history. Fast forward to the early 1930s, de Havilland now owned a successful aircraft company. But the world of aviation had begun its widespread transition to metal-based aircraft, celebrated as the future due to durability and structural strength, yet de Havilland remained stubbornly convinced that wood still had strategic advantages, notably weight reduction and aerodynamic efficiency, telling critics that metal simply made planes slower, and that in battle what mattered more than armor or gun platforms was speed and maneuverability, deriding the idea of building airplane fortresses by pointing out you don't armor a squirrel with iron plating to make it run from predators, which, while metaphorical, held razor-sharp truth. In 1934, to prove his position, he entered the McRobertson Air Race, a grueling 11,200-mile competition from England to Melbourne, Australia, with his wooden DH-98 Comet. And to the astonishment of skeptics, the aircraft not only completed the race but won decisively, setting new speed records and humiliating the "wood is weak" argument. Yet the aviation community largely dismissed the achievement, unwilling to accept that their steel-bound assumptions could be so thoroughly dismantled by timber and glue. By 1936, as Germany began rapidly rearming in the lead-up to World War II, the British government issued specifications for a new bomber, requesting a twin-engine aircraft capable of carrying 3,000 pounds of ordnance at a cruising speed of 300 miles per hour. Manufacturers quickly responded with predictable, metal-heavy, multi-gun fortress designs, each bristling with turrets and armor, believing survival meant being able to withstand attacks rather than avoid them. Everyone except de Havilland, who boldly proposed eliminating defensive equipment entirely, stripping away guns, armor, and unnecessary crew to lighten the craft, then using the weight saved to boost speed and bomb capacity, arguing that if the plane was fast enough, it simply wouldn't be caught or shot at in the first place. While other designers drafted battlefield fortresses, de Havilland envisioned a phantom, a predator too swift to target, investing exclusively in propulsion and aerodynamics, crafting a wooden shell reinforced with ingenious resin layering techniques that gave it strength without metal, and ultimately mounting two Merlin engines, at the time the most powerful aircraft engines in existence. This resulted in an aircraft unlike anything the world had seen, achieving a cruising speed of 325 miles per hour and a maximum speed close to 400 miles per hour, effectively outpacing almost every fighter plane available to Germany at that time, transforming the bomber role from durable and slow to a nearly untouchable strike vehicle. Beyond its performance, the Mosquito's real brilliance emerged in production strategy, as the use of wood meant unrestricted access to raw materials at a time when aluminum and metal alloys were critically depleted due to concurrent manufacturing demands, enabling construction using skilled carpenters and cabinet makers rather than scarce riveters and aviation metalworkers. While the rest of the industry fought over limited steel and aluminum supplies, the Havilland recruited the piano builders, furniture craftsmen, and cabinet artisans of Britain, enabling rapid manufacturing with an alternative workforce previously underutilized, simultaneously contributing to war production while preserving critical metal resources for other strategic assets. In addition, by removing all defensive gun stations, eliminating the need for ammunition stores, and reducing personnel from typical multi-man bomber teams to just 2 crew members, the Mosquito could carry an additional 1,000 pounds of bombs, making it not only faster, but more lethal, maximizing payload delivery speed and frequency, fundamentally redefining bomber doctrine. You'd assume any high-level strategist would recognize such genius. Yet the British government, influenced by political pressures and industrial lobbying, initially rejected the design outright, deeming wood inadequate and the concept irresponsible, likely fearing that a successful wooden plane would undermine big metal's influence and profitability. Amongst many critics, the most vocal opposition came from Lord Beaverbrook, the Minister of Aircraft Production, who dismissed the project with condescension, leading to the removal of its primary supporter, Air Marshal Wilfred Freeman, the only combat-experienced voice in the debate, who had already correctly backed the development of vital war aircraft such as the Spitfire, Hurricane, Lancaster, and the very Merlin engines used in the Mosquito. However, politics overshadowed evidence, and the Mosquito project was shelved until 1940 arrived, bringing with it the brutal Battle of Britain, a months-long relentless aerial onslaught by German bombers that cost the RAF thousands of aircraft and pilots, devastating their air capabilities and metal supplies. Suddenly, the plane once ridiculed became the nation's salvation. As desperate for aircraft and short on manufacturing resources, the government reversed its stance and placed an emergency order for 50 units, granting de Havilland the opportunity to prove his vision under combat conditions. Production commenced immediately, and once the Mosquito entered RAF service, pilots were astonished by its unmatched agility, raw power, and responsiveness, though its high-speed takeoff and landing characteristics required immense skill, leading to a policy allowing only the most proficient aviators to pilot it. Its first mission was so secretive that much of the military command was unaware of its existence, deployed as a long-range reconnaissance craft capable of flying from England to the Soviet Union and back without refueling by replacing bomb payload with additional fuel tanks, effectively becoming the world's first highly efficient long-range reconnaissance platform. From 1941 onward, the Mosquito infiltrated hostile airspace to collect enemy movement intelligence deep within German territory, often without even being detected, setting surveillance and strategic mapping benchmarks later inherited by post-war reconnaissance jets like the SR-71. By 1942, the RAF repurposed it back into its intended role, now integrating hybrid configurations using reduced bomb payload and auxiliary fuel, empowering missions deep into enemy land. In one notable operation, Mosquitoes executed a daring low-altitude strike on Gestapo headquarters in Norway, flying at dangerously close proximity to the terrain to avoid radar detection, dropping 500-pound bombs with extraordinary accuracy, but due to extended fuse timers meant to prevent self-destruction from flying so low, the bombs penetrated clean through the structure and exited into the rear before exploding, causing devastation beyond, but not within, the intended target area, turning the mission into what pilots dubbed an unsuccessful success. Despite the technical setback, the maneuver demonstrated the Mosquito's unmatched ability to penetrate hostile zones undetected, deliver ordnance with precision, and escape before being intercepted. Following this, RAF strategists began deploying Mosquitoes in nightly nuisance raids over Germany, striking critical supply, manufacturing, rail, and command locations. Repeatedly bombing targets, larger formations struggled to hit effectively, as enemy air defenses simply couldn't respond quickly enough. As German fighters scrambled toward radar blips, Mosquitoes often turned away just minutes before interception, taunting Luftwaffe commanders by reappearing hours later on a new vector, toying with their air capabilities and exhausting fuel and manpower resources. Some pilots likened it to shadowboxing with a phantom made of pine, a poetic reflection of how the Germans faltered repeatedly against an aircraft they originally dismissed as inferior. As confidence grew, the RAF began experimenting with heavier payloads, eventually equipping Mosquitoes to carry the massive 4,000-pound Cookie bomb, previously believed only deployable by larger aircraft like the Lancaster, transforming the Mosquito into a miniature high-speed heavy bomber, striking urban and strategic targets with shocking precision. One particularly infamous moment was when Mosquito squadrons raided Berlin during a major speech by Hermann Göring, causing chaos, cutting power, and forcing him to confront the humiliating irony that his Air Force had once proudly declared no wooden plane could pose a threat. Goering later angrily remarked that the British had swindled us with their wooden plane, adding that if only Germany had possessed such aircraft, they might have won the war, an admission both bitter and historically significant. Missions expanded from selective targeting to structural sabotage and aerial harassment, such as a legendary sortie in which Mosquito crews flew so close to the ground their propellers sliced crop tops on approach, then pulled up over central Berlin to drop bombs in full daylight before diving back to escape, leaving anti-aircraft crews firing into empty sky. Across France, they performed surgical strikes on prison walls to free captive resistance leaders, executed bridge-busting runs under power lines, and even used radio interference systems to disrupt German navigation, cementing their role not only as bombers but as intelligent tactical warfare instruments. Within the RAF, Mosquito crews embraced a reputation as elite, unpredictable, and often daring to the point of recklessness. Threading river valleys and climbing mountainous terrain at treetop level, racing through danger zones where no conventional bomber could survive, motivated by the knowledge that if caught in dogfight, they could still outrun most German fighters by applying full throttle and diving, using gravity and power to escape. In the final years of the war, Mosquito served as night fighters too, equipped with radar to intercept German bombers during nighttime raids, proving both vastly capable and exceptionally versatile, giving rise to combat doctrines built around their speed and invisibility. Each mission mocked the enemy's assumptions, embodying the principle that the most effective strategy against overwhelming force is not confrontation, but evasion and precision. And as the war progressed, the Mosquito became one of the few aircraft continually upgraded and deployed on multiple operational fronts, with over 7,700 built by war's end. Constructed rapidly in distributed factories, many of which once made musical instruments, turning peaceful craftsmanship into wartime engineering, a transformation unique in emanation history. The Mosquito's wooden body avoided radar reflections common in metal aircraft, giving it primitive, stealth-like attributes long before the word stealth entered military vocabulary. And this, combined with raw engine power, made it a literal ghost in hostile skies, feared and respected simultaneously. Many RAF pilots swore that flying the Mosquito felt more like racing than combat, a sensation confirmed by constant near misses with anti-aircraft fire that seemed always arrive moments too late. When historians look back at the era, they frequently highlight the Mosquito as an aircraft built on stubborn belief, innovation, and an almost comedic disregard for traditional military thought. A machine that redefined what materials, design thinking, and aerodynamic mastery could accomplish during wartime. Its legacy persists as one of the most versatile warplanes ever built, performing reconnaissance, high-speed bombing, escort duty, intelligence gathering, pathfinding, night interception, psychological warfare, and even propaganda disruption, as its appearances during Nazi celebratory announcements become symbolic reminders that no German city or leader was untouchable, further demoralizing enemy morale. After the war, aviation experts studied its aerodynamic efficiency and design philosophy to inform the next generation of high-performance aircraft, acknowledging that ideas once ridiculed as laughable actually propelled military aviation forward. In the end, the DH-98 Mosquito was not a weakness disguised as innovation, but innovation disguised as weakness. A masterstroke of strategic engineering that turned wood, glue, and imagination into a weapon Germany could neither match nor effectively counter. It didn't just troll German fighters by outrunning them, it embarrassed German leadership by proving that British ingenuity didn't require the strongest material, only the smartest strategy and the bravest pilots willing to fly it like lightning. And the Mosquito did exactly that, turning skepticism into silence and leaving behind a clear lesson that in times of war, the most dangerous weapon is not heavy armor or overwhelming firepower, but speed, unpredictability, and the refusal to build for defense when you can instead build to never be caught. Yet the true marvel of the Mosquito's legacy is not merely described in specifications, combat records, or strategic after-action reports. It lives in the memories of those who flew it, maintained it, depended on it, and even feared it. One RAF pilot famously remarked that flying the Mosquito felt like riding a lightning bolt through the sky, a raw testament to the symbiosis between man and machine, where the aircraft did not just serve its pilot, it became his instinctive extension. He recalled pushing the throttle so hard in one combat situation that he felt it might tear off, driving the engines into a near redline state as tracer fire clawed at the air behind him, only to watch the enemy fade into the distance, defeated not by force but by the impossible pace at which the Mosquito escaped. These pilots understood what few others did, that survival wasn't a product of armor or armament, but of being untouchable. In conversations held long after the war, when the adrenaline had been replaced by quiet reflection, multiple Mosquito aviators admitted that they sometimes flew dangerously low or faster than advised, not simply because the mission demanded it, but because the plane inspired a confidence most aircraft couldn't. They described it almost like a living creature, responsive and agile, finely attuned to subtle adjustments. On missions across occupied Europe, they would weave through valleys where visibility was nearly non-existent, and fog hugged the ground like a trap, yet never once did the Mosquito betray them, as if it understood the risks and embraced them. It's rare that machines earn emotional loyalty, but for many, the Mosquito wasn't just their aircraft. It was a partner in defiance. There were instances when Mosquitoes were sent not to destroy, but to send a message. One such mission occurred in 1944, when Mosquito crews were ordered to disrupt a high-ranking German officer's scheduled address in Amsterdam. The objective wasn't to eliminate him, but to send a psychological signal that the war was closing in on the Nazi leadership. Flying barely meters over rooftops, the Mosquito pilots thundered past the venue at high speed, releasing small bombs at a calculated offset, producing an explosive shockwave that rattled windows and cut the power, silencing the address mid-speech. What followed was not military triumph, but profound humiliation for the Nazi officials present, as the aircraft vanished before pursuit planes even got off the ground. Reports indicate that the incident sowed panic among the occupying forces, prompting immediate defensive reconsiderations in urban command posts. It wasn't just about destruction. It was about psychological warfare executed with surgical precision. Even when Mosquito operations failed tactically, they succeeded strategically. In one daring attack on Berlin rail yards, only 2 out of 4 bombs detonated upon impact due to timer miscalculations. The physical damage was minimal. Yet German intelligence documents later revealed that the raid prompted the diversion of hundreds of fighter aircraft away from frontline engagements to reinforce urban air defense, a resource shift that inadvertently aided Allied forces fighting elsewhere. This is the silent value the Mosquito brought to the war. It forced enemy commanders into reactive posture, always chasing, never dictating. As time went on, Mosquito squadrons were increasingly entrusted with elite assignments. One of the most dangerous was the infamous Operation Jericho in February 1944, targeting Amiens prison in France. With intelligence suggesting that the Gestapo planned to execute resistance prisoners who held crucial information, Mosquito crews launched at low altitude during severe winter weather, visibility near zero, timing precise to the second. They released bombs that shattered outer walls, enabling many detainees to escape before German reinforcements could respond. Though the mission drew controversy due to collateral risk, the operation achieved strategic intent and elevated the Mosquito from tactical asset to legend. Pilots were counted flying so low their landing gear almost clipped treetops, yet they did so with unwavering commitment, knowing they were racing against not only German defenses, but against execution schedules. It wasn't just the pilots who played a vital role. Ground crews, many of whom came from civilian crafting professions, took immense pride in maintaining and manufacturing the aircraft. These were men and women who once built pianos, boats, cabinetry, and fine woodworking pieces. When war demanded, they repurposed their precision and craftsmanship into constructing fuselages and wing structures with tolerances so fine that even metal engineers were astonished. De Havilland later stated that the Mosquito was as much a civilian victory as a military one, the embodiment of a nation's collective intellect where artistry and engineering became indistinguishable. These factory workers labored with unseen dedication, often without full awareness of the strategic importance of their output. They simply knew they were building something important, something that mattered. When wartime secrecy was lifted years later, many cried upon learning that their hands had built the aircraft responsible for liberating prisoners, thwarting high-level German operations, and turning the tide of air warfare. Many of the most remarkable Mosquito missions were conducted outside the realm of direct conflict. In the late stages of the war, the RAF used Mosquitoes to disrupt German night bomber operations. Equipped with advanced radar, these Mosquitoes intercepted enemy aircraft under cover of darkness, using superior speed to chase down targets before they reached Britain. Some Mosquito night fighter crews became so proficient that they accounted for over a dozen confirmed kills each, changing the course of nocturnal air superiority in favor of the Allies. German bomber crews began referring to the Mosquito as der Schattenjäger, meaning the shadow hunter, a name earned not from brute force, but from the rare and unnerving sensation of being hunted by something unseen until it struck. As air war doctrine evolved, military strategists observed how the Mosquito made heavy, slow-moving aircraft almost conceptually obsolete. The U.S. Air Force and other post-war aviation authorities studied Mosquito design principles, especially emphasizing minimal weight, maximized engine performance, and aerodynamic shaping. Though the advent of jet propulsion would soon alter the landscape, the conceptual aspects of speed over armor, precision strike versus saturation bombing, and minimal visibility remained key design influences well into the Cold War era. Even modern stealth aircraft owe aspects of their strategy to the Mosquito's avoidance-based approach. Engineers studying the Mosquito after the war noted its low radar profile, understanding that wood absorbed radar signals differently than metal, a trait not deliberately intended, but coincidentally aligned with future stealth technology. The end of World War II did not mark the end of the Mosquito's service.
Several were retained for high-speed reconnaissance during post-war geopolitical tensions. In some regions, they were even used for aerial photography and storm tracking due to their ability to outpace severe weather patterns. One Mosquito was reportedly deployed to monitor volcanic activity, flying at speeds high enough to avoid turbulent ash clouds while capturing essential imagery. Long after its retirement from combat roles, the aircraft still defied expectations, proving its versatility extended beyond military application. Among the countless stories from Mosquito operations, one stands out in particular. In early 1945, a Mosquito squadron was tasked with striking a German communications facility positioned deep within the Black Forest, an area defended by both radar and ground-based artillery. The mission required flight at low altitude through heavy fog, using compass navigation and near constant turbulence. The lead aircraft, flown by two veteran pilots, successfully located the target using sheer instinct and timing, dropping their 500-pound ordnance directly on command buildings, severing communication lines to multiple German divisions. But as they pulled away, the aircraft struck the upper branches of pine trees at over 300 miles per hour, damaging its undercarriage. Instead of ditching, they ascended, pushed the engines to maximum output, and escaped into cloud cover. They managed to land in Britain with one landing strut completely destroyed, sliding across the runway in a controlled skid. Both pilots exited unharmed. One was quoted saying, "We asked too much of her today, and somehow she gave it." Flight engineers inspecting the aircraft observed deep wood splintering across the lower fuselage, yet the structural integrity remained intact. Wooden construction, once scorned, had prevented catastrophic failure. As Allied forces advanced across Europe, Mosquito missions increased in frequency, but decreased in visibility. Many of the final strikes they performed were not recorded in detail due to operational urgency. Pilots flew during hours with little rest, returning to bases caked in exhaustion, yet often eager to fly again. The camaraderie among Mosquito crews became legendary, driven by shared experiences of pushing the aircraft to the brink of physics. Some accounts mention crews competing informally to achieve the fastest ground run times in transit missions, with one pilot documenting a flight from southern England to the French coastline in under 18 minutes, a record believed to still stand unofficially. By war's end, the Mosquito had carried out reconnaissance, precision strikes, convoy escort, night fighter interceptions, strategic disruption, communications sabotage, prison break operations, and countless uncredited intimidation raids. It was not the most produced aircraft of the war, nor the most heavily armed, nor the most technologically advanced, but it was unquestionably the most adaptable. A single airframe type fulfilling over half a dozen roles at elite-level performance was unheard of. It wasn't merely part of the war, it changed the very manner in which air war was fought. Even after its official retirement, seasoned pilots reflected that no aircraft since quite replicated its personality. Jet fighters surpassed it in speed, bombers in size, and stealth aircraft in evasion. Yet none possessed the raw, creative defiance embodied by the Mosquito. The aircraft was not designed with fear of the enemy, it was designed to embarrass them, and it succeeded repeatedly. When the war trials concluded, Geoffrey de Havilland was recognized formally for his contribution to aviation and national defense. Yet in interviews, he rarely spoke of medals or official commendations, instead emphasizing the importance of unconventional thinking and creative engineering. His favorite anecdote involved a critic who, upon seeing the Mosquito for the first time, sarcastically asked, "Built it from furniture, did you?" To which de Havilland replied, "No, I built it from determination." It is a statement quoted in memorials, not because it's clever, but because it encapsulates the spirit of the entire project. Today, few Mosquitoes remain. Time has taken its toll on wooden frames. The ones that do survive are protected as historical artifacts, preserved not only as machines, but as symbols. Museums often display them suspended mid-air, as if even from stillness they might accelerate away at will. Volunteers restoring these aircraft use woodworking techniques passed down through generations, preserving the link between builder and machine. When engines are occasionally powered for commemorative demonstrations, audiences often report that the aircraft doesn't sound like a plane. It sounds like defiance.
The story of the DH-98 Mosquito is not just one of war. It is a chronicle of innovation overcoming doubt, of belief competing with bureaucracy, of speed outmaneuvering strength. It stands as a reminder that strategy, ingenuity, and courage can redefine what is possible. The aircraft that once had to beg for approval ultimately became one of the greatest assets to Allied victory, proving that the strongest machines are not always the heaviest, the most powerful ideas are not always the most accepted, and sometimes the weapon that makes history is made from wood. And so the war ended, but the legend of the Mosquito did not. Long after cannons fell silent and runways cleared, its lessons traveled through every aircraft that values agility over armor, every strategy that embraces unpredictability, and every innovator who refuses to accept that tradition must be obeyed. It is remembered not as the fastest or most destructive, but as the aircraft that dared to believe speed could be a shield and intelligence could be a weapon. It remains, forever, the wooden thunderbolt of the skies.